Pylons certainly bothered Malcolm Campbell, a retired Canterbury farmer. He used them as a symbol of protest.
And a 63-year-old man will be appearing in the Christchurch District Court today to face 12 counts of intentional damage in relation to the attacks on the power pylons.
In June 2000, he faced a dozen charges of damaging National Grid pylons. If successful in toppling them, the prosecution said power would have been cut off to the entire North Island. His alleged motive for the sabotage was to express opposition to the sale of New Zealand power assets to foreign multinationals. A jury wasn't convinced, and he was acquitted on all charges. Growing concern over the health effects of living near overhead wires caused pylon problems of another kind. 50 years ago, the National Grid was built across the riverhead property of David Lloyd. He says his land is now greatly devalued by negative pylon perception, and he wants compensation. Transpower, who own and maintain the grid, say not a chance. The World Health Organization recommend a 50 to 100 metre buffer zone away from high voltage overhead wires for residences, schools and playgrounds. This policy is called prudent avoidance.
Professor Neil Cherry from Christchurch has done extensive research on it and has proven that there's absolutely categoric proof that electromagnetic force fields from things like pylons and overhead power wires cause things like leukemia and cancer. And so they've done even extensive tests in places like Wales and in New York City, where women in utero who have been living in high radiation areas have had stillborn children, high predominance of leukemia in young children. And in New Zealand, they're finding now that farmers who have dairy cows who are pasturing them in paddocks where they've got pylons on their property, birth defects in the calves, stillborn. So to have this in a school situation where it's just day in and day out, these children have been bombarded with it. I mean, I'm just really glad my children don't go to the school, but these people have got no choice. Move the school. Dedicate the area to pylons.
The only downfall we've had with our pylons is all of our cats have run away. We've had 13 cats in 3 years and they've all just disappeared.
Do you own a pylon?
Basically I do. People say it's a motorway, but I've been out to the motorway and cats are nowhere to be seen. We've actually got 3 cats who live up the road that used to live here, but now they will not come near the place. And the other 10 cats, I've got no idea where they are. So partly I do blame the pylon.
In the 1920s and 30s, a group of renowned English poets called themselves the Pylon Poets. Stephen Spender wrote, "Pylons, those pillars bear, like nude giant girls that have no secret." Well, maybe that's fine for English pylons. I think our pylons just look pissed off, as if tired of holding the wires, and maybe at any moment they could just put them down and go do something else. But it's the look of pylons that fascinates.
There's always been a really interesting debate about the design of pylons. We tend to see them as being a functional engineering construction, but architects and landscape architects have always been involved in the design of them. In the 1920s and 30s, classical architect Sir Reginald Bloomfield was actually involved in adjusting shape, doing some modifications to the shape. And in the 1990s, a French electrical company had a competition to design a new pylon, which many well-known architects and landscape architects entered, and the company are now producing some of those designs. There is an unavoidable anthropomorphic figure in them. You know, they do look like people, the arms, the legs, they have that kind of shape. I also think about the triangulation on them, whether that might be an influence of the 1930s Art Deco, jazz design culture.
Pylons look like people walking because they've got those sink arms on them. Tell me why they're there, those arms with bolts on. Tell me why they're there.
You tell me why, Craig.
So they can carry the bolts and take the wires up north.
And do you think they look like people?
Yes, they do. No, they don't. They look like pylon bolts. And I like the houses near pylons. I like the houses next to pylons. Those houses there are like next to pylons and Weezer Lane. I like the Otara power station and the bolts of the pylons there. There's lots of pylons in Otara. I saw spark coming out of the pylon, that little bright spark coming out of the bolt, off the wire. Spark coming out of the bolt. A bright spark.
Pylons. Low-rent Eiffel Towers, monuments of modernity, or ugly eyesores. It's all a matter of perspective, really.
It's a view. It's a view. It's a view.
It's basically like having a grandma in a restaurant. You see it, but you just don't really take much notice of it. Personally, I reckon I'd rather have a pylon than a living room mirror.